Good evening, panelists and viewers. I'm Rinku Vadera, your moderator for the discussion on securing Jammu and Kashmir. To set the tone of the discussion, I would like to begin with some history of Jammu and Kashmir. The state of Jammu and Kashmir was the scene of full blown insurgency in the 1990s. Incidents of violence dropped after the advent of the new millennium, but disturbances started building up again. And in 2016, there was what appeared to be a complete breakdown of the law and order situation after the killing of Burhan Wani. With the breakdown in the peace process between India and Pakistan, and with the fate of Kashmir tied to it, uh, a lasting normalcy appeared elusive. The tide turned after the abrogation of Article 370 and Article 35A. I welcome the distinguished panel of men who proudly donned the uniform on this panel, who are expert commentators on national security, defense, and strategic issues on national and international fora. To begin with, I would like to introduce Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, PVSM, UYSM, AVSM, SM, VSM, and BAR. He served at many important appointments, including as GOC 15 Corps during his 40 years of distinguished service, and was appointed as the Chancellor of Kashmir University by the President of India. He is a member, National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA of India, and fellow at Vivekanand International Foundation. Dr. Sheshpal Vaid, who served in the IPS for 33 years and superannuated from the prestigious post of Director General of Police, Jammu and Kashmir, is a recipient of many meritorious and gallantry awards. Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia, PVSM, AVSM, SM, who superannuated after 40 years of distinguished service, the last appointment being Director General Military Operations of the Indian Army, and the delicate nature of whose appointment cannot be overemphasized in the context of the current discussion. He also served as the director of Center for Joint Warfare Studies, an MOD think tank based in New Delhi. Major General Arvind Bhatia served for 36 years in the Indian Army, the last tenure being as Assistant Chief of Integrated Defense Staff, Training and Doctrine, and 2 years as military attaché in Pakistan earlier in his service, among his various other assignments as instructor at IMTROT at Bhutan and at the IMA in Dehradun. Towards the end of the discussion, we would like to hear concrete solutions from our panelists about India's strategy for dealing with terror at the local, national, and international levels in short, medium, and long-term scenarios. I will begin the panel discussion now with General Hasnain. Sir, the peace dividends and Indian Army initiatives for winning hearts and minds in Kashmir have been an undeniable success. But it is our soldiers who face the worst from the enemy and also a lot of hostility from the native population as well. In the deadliest incident for the country's security forces in the Himalayan region this year, 5 soldiers fell after a shootout with terrorists near the border with Pakistan. The media, on the other hand, has consistently focused on the oppressive nature of army deployment in the region, rather than these terrorist activities. In the light of the recent civilian killings also, sir, your comment is invited.
Thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me for this wonderful panel, to this wonderful panel and for this great seminar. I think this is at a very appropriate time, putting it out on 26 November. If I may be permitted, I would just like to recall that 7 days before 26/11, I was still in Baramulla, and a major operation was conducted in my area of responsibility with an infiltrating group which had managed to get in and was supposed to strike in the Sopore area just around 26/11. And we managed to track that out over a 7 or 8 day operation, very much like the way the operation Punch is going on at the moment. And we made sure that all the 7 terrorists were eliminated. So I just want to remind your viewers, persistence is always there when it comes to our anti-terror operations, we always make sure that persistent efforts will continue and we will not ever stop before we have eliminated those terrorists. That doesn't mean that you have eliminated terrorism. You have to remember one thing: eliminating terrorists does not lead to eliminating terrorism. And therefore, the basic premise on what was just spoken about winning hearts and minds is based on the fact that you have to separate the people from the terrorist. Because the people are sandwiched here between the terrorist and the security forces. And the people, or the Awam as it's called in Kashmir, is the center of gravity. The Indian Army has always followed a people-friendly approach. People-friendly operations, people-friendly approach. Right at the beginning, starting from 1989-90, we did not adopt Sadbhavana at that time. People think that since Sadbhavana was only adopted in 1997, the Indian Army was not into this whole concept of winning hearts and minds. Let me reassure you, right from 1989, we had what is called a mix, a balance of hard and soft power. We know the importance, the Indian Army knows it, the Indian Army soldiers know it, the importance of keeping the people on our side. We have worked on it, we have worked very hard on it. Unfortunately, we have not been able to perhaps communicate sufficiently with the rest of India, the people in the rest of India, who do not correctly appreciate what the concept of operations in the Kashmir Valley are, or in Jammu and Kashmir are. They think the Indian Army is there only for the conduct of robust operations. The second thing is, within the army itself, within our cadres itself, this is alien to the whole idea of warfare. Because when you treat an enemy as an enemy, you don't start you start employing soft power. So here there is a level of confusion in the public in India, and many times among a lot of people within the uniform, who think their job is only here to eliminate terrorists. Not realizing that the strategy of the Indian Army, the strategy of the higher commander, his intent is to resolve the problem. And the resolving of the problem is through the balance of hard and soft power. This is something on which we have to work much more. Unfortunately, the media in India also doesn't understand this correctly. And you find all kinds of questioning being done, particularly on electronic media, on the methodologies and concepts that the Indian Army follows. The way that it treats people in the street, the people in the public at large, despite the fact that there is a fairly large and fairly determined pushback against us by the public. What you don't perhaps see, what people don't see there normally is the acceptance by the public of the activities of the Indian Army. I wish a lot of people from India, a lot of people from the media could come and see the medical camps that we conduct. How people come up and hug our doctors. How when we announce that a particular unit or a subunit of the Rashtriya Rifles is moving out from an area, we are relocating it, how there is a dharna on our doorstep to tell us, you cannot move out from our villages. Your presence is what provides us security. These things are not known to them. These things are hardly known to people around. And that's why it's so important, because at the end of the day, your aim is entirely that the entire population of Kashmir must wish you with Jai Hind. The day the population of Kashmir wishes you with Jai Hind, you have won the battle. Thank you.
That was very well said, General Hasnain. In fact, I'm looking forward to the day when Tiranga is there on every spot in Kashmir and with equal love and respect as we do in the army and other places in the country. Dr. Ved, my next question is for you, sir. A large population of the youth has only seen violence since they were born. How effective has the peace dividend been in the valley in your experience within the civil administration? Do you think something went wrong, or do you think there were lessons that were learned? Please share your experience with us, sir.
Violence, what we have been seeing for the last 3 decades in Kashmir, a full generation of Kashmiri boys were born after 1990, and those who are now in their youth, they have seen only this period of violence and the period of hartals, period the Bandh calls and disruption and lack of tourism, lack of development, all in these 3 decades, the destruction and death which was brought by this the covert war which Pakistan has launched against India, and the proxy war which Kashmir is witnessing as a battleground. This whole generation has come up, but see, in the early 90s, we saw an upsurge of violence all across the valley, and then slowly the Indian Army, the paramilitary, and J&K police took an upper hand over the terrorists, and then we brought a situation to the level in 1996-97 that assembly parliament election initially, and then assembly elections were conducted, and a political government was brought by an elected government took place in Kashmir, and after that the level of violence started coming down. But then suddenly the deep state in Pakistan changed its tactics and started what in 99 you all are aware, the Kargil war, and then the Indian Army had to be withdrawn from most of the areas of the LOC and sent to Kargil. As a result, a lot of gaps took place in most of the LOC areas, and a lot of foreign terrorists entered. So we saw another phase of violence unleashed by Pakistan. The notorious, the Fidain attacks, suicidal attacks, and then in 2002 we had another democratic, very fair election in which Mufti Muhammad Sayyid and Congress parties, PDP and Congress parties elected government came up. The level of violence it peaked in 2001 by all parameters, but then after that it started coming down, and it virtually almost became so peaceful that hardly very few incidents were taking place. But then again in 2008, the Amarnath land row issue was politicized. It led to a lot of street violence. And 2008, 2009, 2010, we saw huge violence on the streets. In fact, killing of about 110 people in the police firing and the law and order which actually erupted. But then again, the level of violence is started coming down, and then, as you mentioned, we had in 2016 Burhan Wani incident, which led to huge law and order situation. I think unprecedented law and order situation in Kashmir. In fact, I had to initially as special DG and then DGP, take the brunt of that level of violence that was seen in Kashmir. It was unprecedented. And then security forces had again, with the concerted effort and operations, brought down the level of violence. We had to arrest thousands of people, detain many of them under Public Safety Act. The upper ground structure was to be demolished, and a lot of people were neutralized and arrested. Slowly, after 2016, the things were stabilized, and the all-out operation was launched jointly by Indian Army, the J&K police, and the paramilitary forces. And the peace dividends you are talking of started showing results after that, and then the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A by Indian Parliament, and you saw how things started stabilizing and improving. The law and order improved. The kind of stone pelting incidents which you were seeing in one day, 50, 60 incidents of stone pelting in one day, came down drastically, virtually to nil. And a lot of terrorist commanders and their ranks were eliminated. So again, the handlers across changed their strategy, and recently, last month, a month before that, you saw killing of civilians, civilian targeted killings of minorities and outside labor. And this is how we have been facing the proxy war unleashed by Pakistan from across. But the my personal view is uh, the ecosystem which continues to exist in Kashmir Valley over the last few decades need to be dismantled before you can actually harness the dividends of peace for a young generation of Kashmir Valley. And I think a lot of steps in that directions are being taken. There are elements in the government, in the judiciary, in the political system, in the police, in all wings of government governance, even in civil society. You talk of education system, you talk of universities, you have elements in media. So they need to be identified. They need to be, the very clear message needs to go that whoever is working against the country and working in favor of the terrorists and Pakistan has to pay the price. He cannot take any benefit from the government system. Now that message needs to be very clearly made out, and I think the dividends of peace will definitely be very, very visible in the days to come if this policy continues. But at the same time, we have three of our generals here. I think most important aspect of this the proxy war which deep state of Pakistan has unleashed is the twofold. Number one, we must do everything in our might to bring it to almost zero level, the infiltration of terrorists and the weapons which are coming. Without that, this terrorism cannot perpetuate. And the last man who's joining terrorist rank. The fact remains, even today, a lot of boys are joining terrorist rank, and we must do everything in our resources to ensure that no boy of Kashmir joins these terrorist ranks. Ultimately, Pakistan takes advantage of in the fault lines in our own backyard. So we need to ensure that no boy joins terrorist ranks. So on these two premise, we need to work out. And the third aspect of it is the misuse of internet and social media, by which this deep state radicalizes our youth, and the various madrasas which are running, they are on the pretext of religious education. Young minds are being polluted and they are being radicalized. I think we need to work on that. These are the three aspects which, if we concentrate, we can definitely bring peace dividends to Kashmir Valley.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ved. You mentioned Pakistan, and I would like General Vinod Bhatia to tell us that since Ziaul Haq's policies were intended to strengthen the Islamic character of Pakistani law, society, and the military, he also hosted the Afghan Mujahideen on Pakistani soil. Given this history of terror sponsorship and the continuous legacy of Islamic ideology in the Pak army, do you think the same has a bearing on the continuing acts of terror that they sponsor in India?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for inviting me to this very distinguished panel. Yes, I think we have to look at it, the securing J&K in two aspects. One is the external factor, which is definitely Pakistan, and the second, internal factors, like said earlier by the two panelists. But Pakistan remains the challenge. The radicalization has been of the army in Pakistan, and we have to understand that Pakistan army drives the India policy, as also they drive the Afghan policy and the US policy and the China policy. It is a domestic, economic, and the political relevance of Pakistan is at stake. So we cannot expect Pakistan army to do what it is not doing, and the proxy war will continue, leading India with thousand cuts of policy which is there, and we have actually changed much of it in the last 4 decades. And today, let me say that the violence levels in Jammu and Kashmir are not so critical. They're still in the public domain and not in the law and order domain. But they are much less than what they were earlier. Especially if you look at the violence level in 2000 as pointed out by Suhail and General Snan, of course, much to contribute to this. The fact remains that how do we change the behavior of the Pakistani army? So that is the key question actually. And Pakistan army behavior can only be changed if we raise the cost for the Pakistani army, uh, the military cost of Pakistani army, which was the first time it was done with the surgical strikes in 2016 September, and thereafter to an extent in the precision airstrikes in Jabba Top. I don't call it Balakot because Balakot is Pakistani construct. It was IW construct because the terrorist camp was Jabba Top. So we have to raise the cost for Pakistan, and they should know that, and the pinch should be felt by the people of Pakistan, because as long as the people of Pakistan keep believing in the Pakistani army, the Pakistan army will encourage to do what it's doing. And now with the situation changing in the region, with Afghanistan, I think the space for terrorism and especially the global terrorism is going to go. It is not the Pakistan region alone, not the Afghanistan region. It is a combined region, the Afpak region, and the pinch is going to be felt, and the impact of this is going to be felt not only in the peripheral countries, that is the CA, the Central Asian republics, the other nations around, but globally also. If you look at the global war on terror or the global terror, it's 80 to 85%. It has a direct or an indirect connect to Pakistan somewhere. So that we need to highlight. We need to make sure that Pakistan is at the military level. I think what we need is a 3P strategy for the military. That is, we have a proactive strategy, we have a preemptive strategy, and we have a punitive strategy. And this has amply demonstrated, and Pakistan should know that. They've been, hiding behind the nuclear rhetoric that we're a nuclear armed nation, and if you do anything, we'll go nuclear. But if you look at what has actually happened is surgical strikes and precision air strikes, both times the nuclear rhetoric was missing. But they have to understand what are our red lines, and they not cross our red lines. Uh, Additionally, I think at the diplomatic level, we need to isolate Pakistan, which has been done to some extent, but it needs it needs a little long-term strategy. It's not going to be easy to change Pakistan's behavior. And at the economic level, I think it's the right time now. Pakistan economically is in a bad shape, and if we could put some more pressure on Pakistan, I think the Pakistan people realize the futility of what is happening along the India borders, and then they will get after Pakistan politics is controlled by Pakistani army. They are smart. Their strategy is very smart. What they did in Afghanistan was very smart. Let me say that we must give them credit for what they're doing. They hunted with the hounds and ran with the hares, and they fought the global war on terror with USA to defeat Taliban, and they trained the Taliban to defeat the US. So it is a win-win situation for Pakistan. But this is going to impact them. They have ridden the tiger. So how do they dismount the tiger? So this, I think, the time, the next few years is absolutely right to put pressure on Pakistan in the military domain, in the political domain, and the economic domain. And if we can do that, and it's already been done to a great extent in the last 5-6 years, starting 2016, and we continue to do that. We need to we need to keep our counter infiltration grid strengthened. Fortunately, despite what has happened on the line of actual control, let me assure that the counter infiltration grid is very effective. But there can be no zero infiltration, as General Hasnan would also tell me. We were both GOC on either side of Veer Panjal. We had infiltration on 21st November. We had infiltration on 19th November in the same Punch Kishnagadi sector. So these things will continue. It's not that there is zero infiltration, but the fact is that we foil the infiltration attempts and we have a very strong counter-terrorism grid. And this has to be combined with the internal to address the internal factors internally, and the security forces, irrespective of what everyone says, especially the media. I think the security forces are doing an excellent job. They're really doing a good job. They fight with zero collateral damage, with near zero human rights violations. It is just not acceptable. So the security forces are up to it. So changing Pakistan's behavior externally and internally, I think we need to look at the internal factors and address them. And there are many internal factors. I'll come back to it later if you have the time. There are strategies to do that. We need for securing Jammu and Kashmir. I think what we need is a long-term vision. Let's say a 15-year vision, a 7-year strategy, and a 3-year action plan. So you have the action plan. You review the action plan. We have had short-term strategies actually. We're being very honest with you. We have very short-term strategies and don't really work out. And this has to be not only the military strategy, but it has to be a political military economic strategy. And we should look at a long-term peace, stability, and economic development in Jammu and Kashmir, where they reap the peace dividends. Unfortunately, after Article 370, things have changed a bit, but the economic development has not taken place because in 2019 there was the aim was to control them. When the pandemic came into being, so that economic development, the peace dividend, which was to be there, has really not happened because of the pandemic. So I do feel that we are on the right track. We have the right strategies. We are putting pressure on Pakistan, and we are doing reasonably well in Jammu and Kashmir. But we'll also have to look at the battle of perceptions, what we do, the narratives out there, and let's look at it positively. We have to address the politics of Kashmir, especially Jammu and Kashmir, which is a major problem. They will need good governance, and they will also need an effective administration. I will end out here for the present, and we can come back and talk about the strategies for internal dynamics of Jammu and Kashmir a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, General Bhatia. General Arvind Bhatia, sir, nobody expects Pak to take abrogation of 370 lying down. Nobody expected. But they have not done anything major except shout at international fora till now. But there are apprehensions that Pak will change tactics or may have done already. Earlier, Pak got a soft treatment due to its geopolitical requirements of the US in the region. Now, with the growing US and India partnership, how do you expect Pak behavior to change?
Thank you, Dr. Vadera, and I feel a little humbled to be sitting along with some very esteemed seniors of mine, luminaries who are our role models. I would say the foundation of the Indian Army is stronger because of luminaries and seniors like General Ata Hasnain and General Vinod Bhatia. So it is very proud feeling which I get to be sitting and sharing the dais with them. But let me be a little more, I would say, realist, having served in Islamabad for almost 3 years. And I know that terrorism in Kashmir is because it is the seeds or the fire burns in Pakistan. We got to realize it. They are the perpetrators. They are the ones where the fire is. They are the ones who are running with the hares and hunting with the hounds. They are the ones who are the crucible of terrorism the world over. They are the ones with the deep state, which is having the veritable arm of the Taliban being part of the ISI. So these are facts which we can't ignore. These are also facts that if we want peace in J&K, we have to ensure that Pakistan is put into place. Now, how do you do it? You don't put a nation which is just one-fourth the size of India in place in, say, 10 years, 20 years. When you have to change the way the nation state behaves, it has to be over a period of 50 odd years. So we've got to be patient, well, but we have to know that this is the state which is responsible for the current embroilgo, the current situation in J&K. Let me now give you a few facts before I move further. First is that with the agreement on 25th of February signed between the two DGMOs, which was at the insistence of Pakistan because they were wanting to get their western boundary and western border sorted out with the action which was happening, the withdrawal of the US and the coming in of the Taliban. So they wanted to focus more on the western borders. So they had a kind of a peace agreement or a no ceasefire violation agreement with India, which was signed on 25th of February. Now, since then, there has been no firing on the line of control. But what has happened? They are improving their infrastructure. Openly, they are seen working in the bunkers, maintaining the bunkers, digging. Defense systems are coming up. Weapon systems are moving ahead. So they are having a kind of a free kind of a 2, 3, 6 months now already, where they can improve their infrastructure to a level which will become quite impregnable after the pounding which they received after the surgical strikes and the duels which took place earlier. So that is one aspect which is happening, that no ceasefire violation, but the no visible kind of a infiltration attempts have reduced. In fact, since 15th of August, in fact, since the last week of July, there's been an uptick in the attempts of training, arming, radicalizing, weaponizing, moving, staging them forward of these terrorists in the POK. So these signs have been picked up. So the worst is yet to come because with now their so-called winning that strategic depth in Afghanistan, the so-called the first time in 20 years having a government which favors Pakistan in along the western borders, so they feel a little emboldened and they feel that they'll now be able to train the mujahids with that greater freedom and degree of deniability in Afghanistan, and then at the right time pump them into J&K. So we got to remember that with the AFPAC thing, though it is unstable, but there has been a great amount of uptick already visible in Pakistani's attempt to foment trouble. Now, when we come to the ground realities, 138 terrorists were killed till about last week, and there have been yesterday. There have been 5 more which are being killed, eliminated. There are about 135, I would say, in the valley, and about 8 to 10 terrorists who have been eliminated south of Pir Panjab. Also, so far this year, about 55 terrorist oblique overground workers have been arrested. North of Pir Panjal ranges, about 39 of them, and 16 odd terrorists oblique OGW have been apprehended south of Pir Panjal. There have been an uptick in the tourism, of course, but lately, if you would see that this year, 28 civilians have also been targeted by the terrorists. Out of those 28 civilians, 12 since 2nd of October, and which includes, of course, that principal, and then there was a teacher, then there was a salesperson, there was a police constable. So there is a pronounced attempt for towards minority killings, targeting of Bihari worker class, which has come to make some money during this time into the valley during the tourism season. So there is an uptick in the violence levels also targeted towards the minorities. So this is what is seen when we look at this. When we come to the present strength of terrorists, and we saw it, the intelligences are saying that there are about 200 plus minus 10 terrorists in the valley and south of Pir Panjal, 180 odd in the valley, and about 20-25 south of Pir Panjal. Out of these 20, I was discussing with the intelligences, and they were saying that they anticipate that about 85 out of these, about 200 plus, are the foreign terrorist elements, and the rest, about 115, 120 odd, would be the terrorists who are homegrown terrorists. Definitely, the recruitment patterns since the last 2, 3 years have shown a downward trend. This year, it is more visible. There's about 25% less recruitment, which has happened. Last year, there were 191 recruits of course, till December, and of course, we have another 40 odd days to go to December of 21. But this year, so far, there have been only 123 recruits which have been recruited in the valley. So things are shaping up. The security situation is much in place. There was a little bit of thinning around during the Eastern Ladakh kind of a face-off with China, but that was largely that has been contained. We recently were told that about 5,500 odd troops of the CRPF and BSF are going to go and thicken up the security grid in the hinterland, and also some of the gaps along the line of control. But definitely, we need to keep in mind that with the coming of winter and with the prognosis that it is going to be a very, very prolonged kind of a winter, we have to tighten the hill sector south of Peer Panjal, of course. Punch Rajouri, we saw lately what happened, and definitely in the river corridors in the plain sector, or what they call the working boundary, or the IB sector, because the rivers, the Oj, the Tarna, the other rivers, the Nikki and the Wadi Tavi, which are flowing into Pakistan, the Ravi per se, the stream becomes very narrow, and because it narrows down, the Sarkanda kind of enables the movement of terrorists to come in from that sector. So we need to
Camouflage.
strengthen the grid, the defensive grid, and our intelligences along the hill sector and the plain sector as we move ahead. But definitely, one thing is very clear, that situation in J&K cannot improve till the time this external tap, which will not be closed unless, like what General Vinod Bhatia said, that we punish the real perpetrator of terrorism or the terrorist, the problems which he is creating for us, not only in J&K, but also the advantages he wants to make of our perceived fault lines, be it on ethnic grounds, be it on religious grounds, be it on economic disparity grounds. So he's trying his best, and he will not sit easy and let us grow, or let both of us grow together. He is not looking for that. I will just read out two statements which in a recent panel discussion also I have said, to just bring into perspective as to how Pakistan thinks about India. This is now we go back to 2014. Hamid Gul, who was the 8th DGISI of Pak military from 87 to 89, and he is considered by many, including Indians and Americans, to be the real perpetrator or the karta of arming the Taliban against the Soviets or the Russians, and also then creating that kind of a mujahid or the terrorist force to infiltrate and uptake the terrorism in J&K from 89 onwards. So what he said in 2014, and he's considered to be the strongest DGSI because of his kind of effect on the geopolitics of the region. He said the ISI used US aid since 9/11 to continue to fund Taliban, and how it benefited from the US decision to initially ignore Taliban and go after the Al Qaeda. When history is written, it will be stated that the ISI defeated the Soviets in Afghanistan with the help of USA. Then there will be another sentence: the ISI, with the help of America, defeated America. So if that is, this only signifies that so far you had mentioned that the USA needed Pakistan because of the sustenance and the training and the equipping and the movement of their troops, including the NATO forces which are there. But now, slowly but surely, that requirement or that leverage which Pakistan has over the USA has ebbed, will ebb further, and the growing friendship between US and India would enable us to put additional pressure on Pakistan to mend their ways. However, this mindset will endure, has remained so far. We need to be cognizant of that fact. I will read another statement which was made by Lieutenant General McMaster, who was a former US NSA. And he has said very categorically, we have to stop pretending that Pakistan is a partner. Pakistan has been acting as an enemy nation by organizing, training, equipping Taliban, and by continuing to use jihadist terrorist organizations as an arm of their foreign policy. We need to treat Pakistan as a pariah state if it doesn't stop its support to terrorists. Now, if you take this in the backdrop to what the latest statement by Zabihullah Mujahid, the spokesperson of Taliban, had to say, and he said on a Pak TV interview very last week, or I think in September, that Pakistan is like a second home. If war should ever resume and the Taliban need an external sanctuary, Pak again would be their preferred home away from home. Now, with all these facts in mind, we know where the root cause is and we need to address that while the security situation, while the winning the hearts and minds of the people, while the strengthening of the grid, all that happens here, while the political and diplomatic initiatives are also taken, we need to understand that we need to sort out Pakistan till we need, or else we'll not get peace in J&K. I would now await for my next turn to continue the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, General Bhatia. They were very important inputs regarding terror recruitment by Pakistan, and we will wait and watch if supporting Taliban backfires on Pakistan itself. My next question is addressed to both General Hasnain and Mr. Vaid. Sir, what is the reason for the Kashmiri youth's affinity towards terrorist activities? And what is the reason that they get attracted to even giving up their lives for this cause?
So this is a very interesting and a very important question. Youth is the core center of any terrorist movement. There is an ideological element to it. There are a lot of ideologues, separatists, generally older people who are leading this kind of movement. But the rank and file, which has to perpetrate, carry out all these actions, primarily comes from the youth cadres, the youth elements. Earlier, we already discussed that in the current situation, we are looking at a segment of youth who were born perhaps in the mid-90s, even the early part of the millennium. And all that they have seen in their lives is nothing but the stamp of the boot. They've only seen the armed force, the army, the Jammu and Kashmir police, the CRPF at their doorstep. They've only seen their parents, their houses being searched, their parents being questioned at checkpoints, and things of this variety. You know, if you put yourself in the shoes of that same segment of population, you start realizing, you start hating the system which is doing all this. This system which is doing all this is for the sake of security. But you can't sell this idea of security to the very people with whom you're doing all this. They take it differently. So what happens is you've got a whole set of alienated youth. That's from the physical side of the experience that they are getting. They are unfortunate that they've been born into a period in which communication technology has really taken off. Everyone is holding a smartphone. I still remember in the late 90s, we were only monitoring radio sets to see if you could get radio communications of the terrorists. Today everyone is communicating with the other person either on email or on various social media platforms and things like that. It's just a touch of a button. Now, messages from across if a young person in Kashmir could hardly communicate with someone in Pakistan in the past. Today, you touch your button, press a few keys, and you got a message across. That same message is coming back to you. So communication technology has made a huge difference here. And it's very clear we should look at Pakistan's aim. In fact, the start point of this whole discussion is Pakistan's aim. What is the aim of Pakistan? It is to create this turbulence in your environment, not allow India to grow. They know what is India's potential. They will not allow you to grow. Their whole intention was to wreak revenge for what happened in 1971. They know that they're not strong enough to do this in the battlefield against you. They know they're not strong enough economically to do this to you. but they will do it to you in other different areas to keep you all the time in the grips of securitization. And this securitization is what leads to this alienation, further alienation. So it's a vicious cycle which goes on. You want to break that vicious cycle somewhere. You have to get back to the youth. You have to approach them. You have to sit down with them. You have to create the environment for them. But the unfortunate thing is that every time the government tries, let me assure you, the Jammu and Kashmir police tries very hard. The army tries very hard. The CRPF has got its own programs. We all work together. We try and reach out to the people. And in the people, when we reach out, the youth is one of our core centers, the core agent organizations to which we like to reach out. Sit with them. Go to schools and colleges. Tell them what is there happening in the rest of the world. There are tours under Sadbhavna which are going out to the rest of the country to see what this youth is missing out, the opportunities that they're missing out. Right? All this is the positive side. Now there's a negative side to it. Right? And much of it is being created by the Kashmiri youth themselves. There's no doubt. You go and study in the rest of India. You've got the scholarships under the Prime Minister's Yojana. Things are being underwritten for you, paid for you. You've got a potential to create a career for yourself. You go to a college, a vocational college somewhere, and there on a day on which India and Pakistan are playing cricket, you start cheering for the Pakistani team. So this is called harakiri. Committing harakiri. Because you want to provoke. You want to provoke the very people who are trying to do things for you. So this is a vicious cycle all the time. Whatever we achieve, whatever the army, the police, the CRPF, the government, whatever we attempt to achieve and manage to achieve year on year is negated by various such activities which are sponsored to a great extent. There's a lot of fun, a lot of money in this game. Let me tell you, there's a tremendous amount of money in this game which flows around. Mercifully, what has happened is, and I'm sure Beth Saab will agree with me, mercifully, one of the good things which has happened is 2016-17 onwards, in his time, when he was the DGP, it started the understanding and recognition that much of this is dependent on networks. That without networks, no terrorist movement can flourish. You have financial networks, you have overground worker networks, you have media networks, drug networks, ideological networks, all kinds of networks are there. You have to neutralize these. You have to get after the overground workers. You have to somehow do this. That is how the negative messaging will at least get marginalized to an extent. I'm glad to tell you that there are lots and lots of people in Kashmir I recently visited and saw for myself, people who are on board, who are making a difference. We need to empower them much more. I find that we are not empowering the people who are with the Indian narrative. Somehow we don't do enough for them. We need to do much more for them. They are risking their lives because they are under threats and potential targets at all times. They are the softest targets at all times. We need to reach out to them and empower them and strengthen them that much more. This movement ultimately is a make or break movement based upon youth. And this understanding should be very clear with us. The security forces, and as not only the security forces, but the entire government, the government of Jammu and Kashmir, every department of government of Jammu and Kashmir, in which very correctly Ved Saab has identified that there are enough people who are separatists by themselves. These people need to come on board, and these people need to do much more for the youth in every other way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill Hasnain. Dr. Beth, can I have your input on the civic action program that was run by the police? And what were the achievements of this program and what all activities were under this umbrella?
See, under the Civic Action Program and Sadbhavna, the army is doing huge work. And Civic Action Program, the J&K police has been engaging not only the youth. We have attempted to involve youth in many sports activities, in educational tours, in getting them involved in various constructive activities. And taking youth away from this cycle of violence, because many of them get attracted and get ideologically trapped into this cycle of violence. And the effort of Indian Army and the other security forces and J&K police has been to wean them away from such destructive activities. And under Civic Action Program, we have been undertaking medical camps. Many places we have tried to engage the families of some of the slain policemen, and even those who are victims of terrorism in various districts and tehsils, involving them in various constructive activities to raise their incomes and all. And also do lot of see, there is a drug menace is very, very prevalent in Kashmir Valley. And a lot of work is being done in the police hospital and other areas of Kashmir Valley, not only in Srinagar, in other districts of Kashmir Valley, where a lot of boys are being de-addicted from the menace of drugs. You can see the huge happiness in the on the faces of their parents when you are able to take out their young boys from drug addiction, because many of them are ruining their lives, and in the process of getting them de-radicalized and de-addicted, these boys actually are able to do a lot of help to their families, because otherwise they would be ruining their careers. So a lot of activities like this, and a lot of focus is on sports activities, whether football or cricket or various other indoor games in Kashmir, because winters you are not able to play outdoor games. So these activities are helping J&K police to build a great rapport with the youth, who is as General Ata Hassan put it, are the prime movers of Kashmir Valley in the days to come, whichever direction we take Jammu and Kashmir ahead. These are the activities J&K police is undertaking.
Thank you, Dr. Ved. I would like to get General Arvind Bhatia sir and General Vinod Bhatia sir's opinion on the talk of people-to-people contacts across the LOC. Do you think it will be beneficial? Can it affect people's thinking in a manner that can bring in peace?
Yes, definitely. I think people-to-people contact is extremely important. There are buses which fly from Punch Ravla Court and again Puri across the Aman Setu Bridge. My experience is definitely very positive. When people from across crossed over, and they came and they were quite surprised and pleasantly surprised to see, because they were given to believe that you cannot pray in Kashmir, you have no freedom in Kashmir, you are treated differently as if you follow Islam. And when they came and when they saw the development on our side of the line of control, the medical facilities, the education facilities, the freedom to pray. And the moment they entered, there's a Mandir Masjid, what we would call the MMG, the Mandir Masjid Gurdwara. They saw that.
The Sarv Dharm Sthals also?
The Sarv Dharm Sthals. And we called it MMG, the Mandir Masjid Gurdwara. That's the Fuji name for it. Yeah, Sarv Dharm Sthal. And they were pleasantly surprised. They did not see that. And they were not very happy to go back. They came to visit and some of them overstayed. Also, when they came in, they carried very little. And when they went back, they were authorized to carry about 30 kgs in the bus. But each one would carry about 70, 80, 100 kgs, and we let them carry. Even the cost of umbrellas in Punch went up. The cost went up because they would carry so much of stuff. So there is a change. People to people contact, I think, is very important, not only across the LC, but even otherwise. We find Pakistani people at large. We have to, we have the same origins, and we got to invest in the people of Pakistan and tell them it's a IW campaign. I would say the information war campaign. Tell them the narratives that they are being badly impacted by the policies of the Pakistani army, who have a very lavish lifestyle, and who is suffering actually? It's the Pakistan economy and the Pakistani people. So it is, definitely along the LC, I think we have to open up people to people contact. It is very important that they realize what is on this side, the development this side, and across when our people used to go and they come back, Kashmiriat is missing across the LC. There is hardly any Kashmiri left. The Kashmiri music is not there. The Kashmiri cuisine is not there. The Kashmiri Penawa is not there. There's no Kashmiri. It has all been degraded by the influx of Punjabis and others across that. Like coal. So people to people contact, I think, is the key issue where we have to get them to understand the harm that is happening to them. And people are simple always. They're very simple people, and they need to listen. I just go back to a little sentence which my fellow soldier and namesake John Bhatia had said. We quoted something what Hamid Pul Singh, but what there's a postscript to it, and the postscript which I talk about is after the Pakistan defeated the US with the help of the US and Soviet with the help of the United States, Pakistan will defeat Pakistan with the help of the Pakistans also. Because this thread of Taliban is not going to stop on the borders. It's going to come to Pakistan was impacted. And thereafter, I think we need to guard against that because when terrorism spreads, after Pakistan, it will be.
I will beg to differ a little with my illustrious senior. People to people contact is good when we look at the globe as a village. When we look at the culture of India, Vasudev Kutum, every guest is an honored person. People to people context in the premise of J&K specifically makes no difference. Actually, that there is no Pakistani Kashmiri anymore in Kashmir. They are Mirpuri Kashmiris are all in UK or Canada. The others have all gone away. The Punjabi Musalman rules the roost, and the narrative which is there in Pakistani occupied Kashmir has nothing to do with Kashmir per se. Also, let's have the fact that the POK part of it is now almost swamped by the Chinese. They have a battalion sitting in Kujre Pass. They have 16 to 2000, 1600 to 2000 people working in Gilgit Baltistan, Chinese at any given time. Now, by having a people to people contact or having a bus and people coming here and seeing that things are much more better in India than in Pakistan, they already know. The social media shows them that, the TV shows them that, the Bollywood movie shows them that. By them coming here and seeing whatever the narrative which is being fed to them, they may take it back, but nothing much comes out of it. However, it gives a chance for them to smuggle in fake currency, to bring in drugs, to bring in a lot of weapons and arms. We don't have full body scanners. I don't think so. We have it in anywhere except for Wagah border. So this trade and this people-to-people contact is very good as semantic, as something that we must do. And this was my biggest bloody problem when I was in Islamabad because there we were losing men along the line of control. There were RT duels, there were beheadings taking place, but we were allowing Wasim Akram to come and do the bowling, whatever coach to KKR. We were allowing the actresses Mahira Khan and all to come and act in Bollywood movies. We were all everywhere else. It was Academy Super Night carry on hunky dory. Peace prevails, increased trade, increase people to people's contact, increase medical tourism, grant more visa. What happens? So we have to be very pragmatic about it. These avenues should be kept open, but the focus is that Pakistan has to be put in place till he starts mending his ways. These kind of things, I feel, can start 20 years from now, 15 years from now. Till then, we need to focus on how do we ensure that the requisite pressure points are pressed so that Pakistan is put in place. Now, we can't take POK conventionally. I don't think so. In the realms of the modern world, we can go into a conventional kind of an operation with Pakistan. But what we need to do is to safeguard what is ours. We need to make these borders so impenetrable that nothing, no infiltration, no drug money, no hawala money, no weapons, even if it is from drones and other things, comes across. Until the time our Western neighbor starts behaving, visible signs are seen in the stoppage of infiltration and all that. We must not start all these people to people contacts and all. We must first the alienation of the Amam, which has taken place within the valley, which was very lucidly brought out by General Atta Hasnain, we must get them out of that. And if that doesn't happen, I feel that the time has come that we give ex-servicemen almost free land in J&K. We get other Indians who are wanting to settle down in J&K, and then that is how we bring the secular nature and try to revive Kashmirians, because Kashmirians includes that the Pandits have a voice, the minorities have a voice, the Sikhs have a voice, the Hindus have a voice, and all that. The mandirs come up, the Amarnath Yatra is able to go on the way it was going on earlier. Everything happens in that manner, and if need be, we get the Tibetans settled there. Let's first sort out the thing within, and then we can commence the people to people contact. I will tell you a small narrative. My father was born in Bhera, and my mother was born in Jhelum. Now, I used to cross that Bhera village, which was 20 kilometers on from the highway, the M3 highway, and I used to stop at the pit stop of Bhera, but never the ISI gave me permission to go and visit where my father was born. So things are, we have to be very pragmatic about it. Uh, I was once told by the ISI protocol officer, sir, unofficially you do go to Bhera, we'll just keep quiet and you visit where your father was born. I said, the Indian army doesn't do anything unofficially, especially in your country. So if you give me permission, I'll go and see where my father was born. If you don't give me permission, I will not. My in-laws came to Islamabad. They wanted to go to Katasraj, which is a a temple and a lake and a pond, and they were not allowed to go there. So we have to be very, very pragmatic about it. People to people contact, even if it is promoted, has no impact on the park establishment, has no impact on the political scene, has no impact on the deep-rooted hatred which Pakistan as a nation, I'm not talking of
Harbors
the
for
people,
India.
harbor for India, and that 100,000 cuts, we are all aware. They are working at it. We need to be cogent of that fact, and we need to be very, very practical about it.
General Hasnain and Mr. Bed, I would like your inputs on this question as well. I want both sides
Yeah.
of knowledge on this. The lockdown post the abrogation, which was more of because of the terrorist diktats rather than the state activity, was blamed upon the state, arbitrarily blamed upon on the state. This is just one aspect of the favorable narrative building by Pakistan and Pakistan proxies. Do you think there's a need for improvement in our strategy for building media perception?
Let me first address this question, which was put to both our eminent generals. And I speak from experience of this, that the first bus, the Karwan-e-Aman, left from Uri on the 7th of April 2005, and I was the commander of the Uri Brigade. And the first trade truck, the truck involving trade, entered into India and left from India from the Aman Setu bridge in 2008 November, when I was the GOC of the Dagger division in Baramulla. I think we need to get the context clear. General Bhatia explained, General Vinod Bhatia explained very correctly one aspect. You see, you got to see the backdrop in 2005 and 2008, why this happened. 2005 was this was the time of the Mufti government, Mufti Muhammad Saeed's government. The healing touch which was going on from 2002 onwards, that was probably the second last year of his he had half a tenure, and after that Ghulam Nabi Azad was to come in. He wanted to leave behind a legacy, and the central government agreed to it, and Musharraf from the other side after the ceasefire. Both sides were in the spirit of bonhomie and attempting to create something different. The Sati Lamba diplomacy was going on. Sati Lamba, Ambassador Sati Lamba a very, very eminent foreign service officer who was doing this shuttle diplomacy between India and between Delhi and Islamabad, and actually building up on the proposals of the so-called 4-point formula to make the line of control irrelevant, borders irrelevant. This is the context with which you got to see this, right? Not that people-to-people contacts for the sake of people-to-people contacts. No, it was for a purpose that it was done at that particular time. Perhaps that narrative is old now, but there was another context to it. There is a segment of population which Vinod Bhatia knows very well, right from Poonch, right till Uri, to Tangdhar and beyond. It's called the Pahadi population. These are different to the Kashmiris. They're different to the Gujar Bakarwals. The Pahadis, they've got a different dialect, right? Very near to Punjabi, Dogra, that they speak. Hugely pro-India. They are absolutely pro-India. You won't find a Pahadi who's a anti-India in any way. It was one of the things for them, because they are the ones who have their relatives on the other side. When the line of control was created, it was not created deliberately. It just happened, and families got divided and villages got divided. These people have not been able to meet their relatives. There are in some cases there are children who were left behind and could not meet their parents, and there was no way by which these people could travel. You could not travel to Delhi and they hope to take a flight to Islamabad and go and meet. It was just outside their capability to do that. For them, this was created. It was essentially created for the Pahadi people, for the people of POK and the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and this segment of people. And it was to create a tremendous amount of goodwill. And this continued, despite the ceasefire violations, etc. This continued both in Poonch and in Uri. I think it achieved a lot at that particular time. It achieved a lot. But it kept the temperatures low even on the LOC. Even when things were going on very hot at that time, there were times when, because of this, temperatures were kept low. But I do agree that today it is a narrative which perhaps is outdated, right? Because things have moved on beyond. And that's why it's very difficult to come back to that 2005-2008 period. And I agree with General Arvind Bhatia that this is the means through which a tremendous amount of illegal narcotics, contraband, SIM cards, fake currency, even weapons. They made even attempts to bring weapons through this into our territory. So unless that could be guaranteed, that you could go against it, I don't think it's a very good idea to perhaps continue with it now. So, I've just put a perspective to both what our very eminent generals just spoke. I just put it from the experience that I had there. To come back to the aspect of the media. The Kashmiri media is a world apart. The media in the rest of India is a world apart. But let me tell you, for information, that Srinagar publishes more than 30 English newspapers every day.
Every day.
That many English newspapers are not published in Delhi or in Bangalore or in Mumbai.
True.
People are hugely into reading. Information is very important, and I can tell you, each and every article which is written in those newspapers is high quality. Very well written, excellent English, right? Very well edited, very professional, very, very professional. Over a period of time, this media did become quite anti-Indian. It was, and particularly our democratic setup permitted this to happen. We thought that this was actually a strength in our country, where we had dissonance, we had anti-nationalism going on, and despite that, we were so tolerant. This was the narrative of the earlier years when we said we are a democratic nation. That is no longer there, because we find that kind of an attitude, that strategy, that approach did not work. So, for example, after 5th of August 2019, the big crackdown on the media, and today you find the media is, reasonably controlled media, right? You don't find those kind of utterances taking place. But let me tell you that there is a very awkward thing in this whole media issue. A lot of things, first of all, Indian media, rest of Indian media, Times of India, Indian Express, none of this is read in Kashmir. A lot of people today are reading it because of Twitter and because of social media, right? And what is being written on the Indian media, the print media, mercifully, is very, very balanced and very, very sane. But a lot of things which come out on the electronic media in the rest of India creates a tremendous kind of a negativity in Kashmir. I wish we could do away with that. I wish we could stop playing those kind of narratives on the electronic media. And there are different channels which keep doing it from here and
But
there.
Jonathan,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have international media also coming in, and internet is available for everyone to read on.
Yeah,
So
that's
that
true.
also builds up so much perception, and it is our choice what we read on the internet.
Absolutely. For example, the Washington Post and the New York
In writing.
Times always are writing against India, and they're writing pro-separatist virtually at most times. Absolutely,
Precisely.
absolutely correct. But the importance of narratives is how to make your own narrative stronger than the other narratives. That is the intent. That is what we should have to make make sure that what is being read, and it should be read by the young Kashmiris, is things which are coming out of India. Most people are not attracted to that reading, but we need to try and make it attractive enough to people to read. For example, there should be very, very balanced people, narratives coming out. There should be personalities who are well known, respected in Kashmir, etc., who write things which are extremely balanced. Both sides don't work against the Kashmiri. The moment you start an anti-Kashmiri narrative at everything, it will build more negativity. I know that there are terrorist actions taking place, there are people dying, there are minorities being targeted. This is a battle zone. It's a battle zone which is in your backyard, a battle zone being created by Pakistan. But if we make it more vicious, we have to try and how to see to stabilize it. We need to look at those ways of how to stabilize it. The moment we start responding to everything which is negative there through more negativity, this vicious cycle is never going to end.
Then
And
we
you are
lost the
not going
battle.
to win. You are not going to win the perception war. I hope we have all. I'm sure all our viewers are aware of what the National Security Advisor has just spoken the other day at the National Police Academy. He said,
Yes,
fourth generation warfare. This is something, the fifth generation warfare. And what is fifth generation warfare? Fifth generation warfare is nothing but social media, right? It's the battle of the narratives, perception, the perception in the mind. We have to professionalize this to a great extent in our country. We increase our overall culture, our strategic culture in the country and understanding of this. Otherwise, what is happening? This very, very low-level, crude understanding of warfare in different forms is being expounded by all kinds of people without an idea about what they're talking.
True.
We need to make our narratives just stronger to bring the Kashmiris on board onto our side. Thank you.
Dr. Ved, can I have your input on this?
Yeah. Thank you. I just endorse what General Atta Hassan said. I don't want to repeat that, but I just want to narrate three incidents when I was DGP, which actually were very, very startling. And we all know how much important the role perception management plays in such battles. And Kashmir, it has tremendous impact. Social media has a huge impact on the young minds, and one criminal incident of a mob lynching in, let's say, in Rajasthan or UP is broadcasted on the social media by cyber mujahids in Pakistan in 1,000 ways, and the young Kashmiri boy seeing a Muslim being lynched. It's a purely criminal incident. It could be a Hindu being lynched by Muslims in some other place, because India is a composite society. But now this criminal incident is portrayed as India being a place where Muslims are not safe. So this is how the deep state bombards Kashmiri young minds to pollute them, make them anti-India. So you can imagine how much impact it will have on the young minds. Another incident. I had a parent coming to my office, and then I realized a lot of people were undergoing the same problem. Young boys getting friendship offer of Facebook and on the Facebook and then slowly chatting and radicalizing these boys. Now, I realized that they have created a battery of thousands of cyber mujahids in Pakistan who were sitting in their homes and uh, in fact, there was an open ad in the Pakistani papers that to fight jihad in Kashmir, you need not go to Kashmir. You can sit at home. You only need to have an internet connection and a smartphone or a laptop. You can play your role in playing a jihad in Kashmir. Now, these were known as cyber mujahids, and they were being paid at home. Now, their job is to look for such incidents and bombard them on Kashmiri young boys. Now, even at that time, I had projected to the government of India, can we come out with solution? We are a tech important nation in the world. I think India is a leading nation in this field. So I had requested the authorities in Delhi that can we come out with a solution that we are able to filter the material which is coming from Pakistan or come out with. You see, in China it doesn't happen, but though we can't follow China because it's a democratic country. But they have come out with a solution that they protect their generation from rest of the world if somebody wants to pollute their minds. Can we do in relation to Pakistan? Because that is other than LOC and IB penetration, where from where infiltration weapons come. The other way they can influence our youth in Kashmir and rest of India of the minority, Muslim minority, is through the medium of internet and social media. So we need to look for a solution to that. So that was another aspect. One more example. One person was killed in Srinagar by terrorists. He was being taken by his mother in an ambulance for to his home in somewhere in Chadur or in district Badgam. The SHO was of that area in Srinagar was only trying to stop that ambulance and bring it to police hospital in the PCR Srinagar to ensure that postmortem takes place, because postmortem is generally in such killings is mandatory. Otherwise, the family will not get compensation. Now, this elaborates the point of General Hasnan that the negativity of this local media in Kashmir, I could witness at that time. The whole incident of this was projected as if the SHO was harassing the lady that her son's postmortem must be done. Now, it was projected, SHO was projected as an enemy of that family and showing that he was snatching the body. It was not so. In fact, he was only trying to help the family. Now, this is the kind of role which media perception actually influences young minds and people in Kashmir against the security forces, against the police. Many such incidents have happened against the Indian Army, Indian J&K police, the CRPF and other forces. So this media perception actually plays a very, very vital role, and I think very little focus has been on this as far as Indian state is concerned. We need to have a greater sense of focus on controlling the media perception in the Kashmir Valley. Another point, which before I hand over to others, is the long-term policy for Kashmir. I think we are only reactive. We are only short-term solutions. We are going for short-term solutions to the problems emanating from time to time. As in the initial remarks, I was narrating how in 30 years the different phases of terrorism have happened. So I think there is a requirement in Delhi for a long-term policy composite policy, comprehensive policy for Kashmir, because it is a covert war launched by Pakistan, and it has to be dealt as a war. And we need to do everything to counter this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vaid. General Vidwan Bhatia, sir, America's handover of power, if we can call it that, and weapons in Afghanistan to a Pak-backed Taliban raises numerous serious security concerns, which include exposing India to a heightened risk of terror. Your comments, please, on this.
Definitely, Pakistan will exploit what are the weaponries there. They exploit the Taliban. They will exploit the terror groups. They control them. We should have no doubts about it. But on the same thing, I don't think the foreign terrorists are too welcome in by the people of Jammu and Kashmir. They're not like they have their own. They're not liked out there. And we saw that in 1999 when they came in. And foreign terrorists do get a lot of this for people. But the fact remains that we have a very effective content infiltration tool. And through this medium, let me assure your viewers that we are effective and it will make a little difference. But we are effective and the Afghanis will not really do much. But the fact remains worldwide there are going to be issues and we have to understand that Pakistan has got nuclear weapons and they got terrorists. And the nuclear weapons, some of them, whatever, even one, or the threatened being, were to be taken over by terrorists. And this is a concern which the United States have also expressed very categorically. There will be major problems for the world and India also. So that I think is a given. We'll have to be very careful. We will strengthen our military in the counter-terrorism group. We need intelligence, which has to be, both in Afghanistan and we'll have to keep our channel open with other nations to get the intelligence within Pakistan, whether the USA, the Russians, the Afghanistan itself. I don't know how we keep our channel open with Taliban, Iran, and other nations. So we'll have to watch out for Pakistan, the spread of Pakistan terrorism with Afghanistan terrorists and US left major amount of weapons. Just to there were over 600,000 small arms, and most of them are fully loaded. And these small arms find their way along the line of control with night sight and other things. We'll have to change our tactics, and we'll have to see. We already are aware of the tactics, and we not go into details. So we are aware that this is going to happen, and the army, and armed forces, and security forces, the police itself, are definitely going to be countering this new modus operandi for the terrorists when they come. Going back to the media, let me also give one simple point, and I'll take just a few seconds over it. The media, when the media reports by default, we make role models out of terrorists. Burhan we make dreaded terrorists. There's no dreaded terrorists. Terrorists are terrorists, and he's eliminated. So we should not put too much of credence in the media to a terrorist by name, by going into the history of his terrorism. Every reporter is talking to his family and his friends and see how he has grown as a very big terrorist and how they
humanizing the terrorist.
Yes, humanizing, and not only humanizing. We by default we are making a role model for others by idolizing them. Dreaded terrorists. There's no dreaded terrorists. Terrorists are terrorists because terrorism is basically scary. So I think we also have to look inwards and make sure. Coming on to what Dr. Vaid was saying, I think we need a lockdown strategy, and we need to also look inwards. One of the major problems in Kashmir is also of education, of employment generation. There are 50,000 volunteers wanting to work there for about, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 5,000 police posts. Similarly, for army recruitment. So we'll have to. There are 46 Army Goodwill public schools, and you get a lot of people telling you, जनाब मेरे बच्चे को आर्मी गुडविल पब्लिक स्कूल में एडमिशन दिला दियो जिंदगी बन जाएगी उसकी. So our schools have education system has to improve. Employment generation for the youth. The aspirations of youth are very important. The employment generation is not there. What do we do? It takes to terrorism. It's an easy target.
True.
Economic development has to take place, and that is, I think, the key area. and empathy for the people, not only within Kashmir, outside Kashmir. When the Kashmiris come to, let's say, study in a university in the NCR, Greater Noida, or somewhere else in the country, you treat him with suspicion. You don't integrate him totally. That empathy is missing. So these are something the government will have to
Work on.
exactly, the government we will have to work on these things: education, economic development, employment generation, empathy. We have to educate ourselves that Kashmir is part of India. The Kashmiris are part of India. We are integrated to them, and we have to treat them with respect also when they are not within Kashmir, but outside Kashmir also.
Hmm. Hmm. General Arvind Bhatia, sir, I would like your input on the same question with an added question to it. We know that the proxies of Pakistan-based terror outfits such as Lashkar-e-Taiba, Hizbul Mujahideen, and Jaish-e-Mohammed are based in Pakistan, and now Pakistan being in the gray zone by the FATF. Do you think these terror bases can shift to Afghanistan and create an increased and heightened terror threat for us?
Thank you for this question. Indications are already there that some of these bases and areas have been provided by the Taliban to Pakistan and the ISI specifically, especially in Nuristan, Nangarhar province, and the other southern and eastern part of Afghanistan, for these cadres to go and start training and weaponize with the weapons which have been made available. Now, to bring things into perspective, the US was offering these weapons which they were to leave behind because it was economically not viable to take out all these weapons the way the Blitzkrieg happened, surprised the world, to take out these weapon systems and give it to other friendly countries. But an offer was made to India, and we had initiated a lot of demands to receive some of these weapon systems from our offices in Qatar. However, it did not fructify because of the pace of the Taliban offensive. People were giving 3 to 6 months for them to take over Kabul, but the fact is that it happened in 11 days or 13 days, and 15th of August, all was lost. So these threats are there, indications are already there, give them a larger amount of uh, deniability factor, but all is not rosy for Pakistan. They have signed a very uneasy truce with the TTP starting from 6th of November for about 30 days. They'll say that they'll take it month by month. And the Taliban has been relatively vague because the ideological, I would say, compatibility between TTP and Taliban is the same. So for them to give them into the hands of Pakistan or to de-weaponize them is not going to be easy. And TTP had put on the, I would say, the tightened the screws in July. 32 kind of attempts were made on the Pak military. 9 Chinese engineers by the Pashtun nationalists or the Baluch nationalists had also been sorted out, or they had been killed. So the fact was that things were troubling Pakistan, and they were wanting to somehow bring TTP on the negotiating table. 8, 9 attempts have been made earlier also. It is not likely to hold. Then the other issues of the TLP, which is, I would say, a fringe political party, spoilers by whatever means, but with the pressure of Pak military, the political dispensation in Pakistan also has been making the right amount of noises, giving them amnesty. Their present chief, Saad Rizvi, is likely, who was a proscribed terrorist, is likely to be freed, while Pakistan's political dispensation or Imran Khan days himself are numbered. People are saying that come 20th of November, uh, Imran would go. And if PTI somehow retains power or this selected government remains in power, then the Pak military will either install Khatak or PMLN, Shahbaz Sharif, as the prime minister for whatever time that we have the new election, 6 months, 1 year, whatever. So things are very, very tenuous, or I would say flexible or fluid in Pakistan, and there are more challenges which are emerging from the region than anything else. Till date, they have not been able to withdraw even a single Jawan from the western borders. They were thinking that with the truce with India along the eastern border and with Taliban now playing ball with them, they'll be able to thin out the troops from regular troops from the western borders. They haven't been able to do so. They were wanting to 90% of the fence along that 2,570 kilometers of the Durand line is already fenced. But the problem is that with the kind of unemployment which has happened, the kind of famine kind of situation which has arisen there, the humanitarian kind of crisis which has happened, and Taliban 2.0, as bad if not worse than Taliban 1.0. So things are not very rosy. Uh, so far, they've been able to have a stricter kind of a border control. Only about 35,000 refugees have come into Pakistan. But come these winters going away and the kind of famine situation there, this influx of refugees and the weapons and the terrorists coming back into within Pakistan is going to exponentially increase. So things are going to be bad for them. But for the Pak military to maintain its primacy, the attempts to foment more trouble along the eastern borders in J&K is likely to increase. And like I said, in the immediate term, because of the winters and the closing of the passes up north, the attempts are going to be more pronounced in the hill sector or down in the plain sector. And definitely indications are already there. And we need to, because our influence, whatever you may say, our influence in Afghanistan has taken a beating with Taliban coming to power. Our
True.
consulates have closed down, our embassies stuttered down, our whatever 3 billion plus of infrastructure remains there. It is not been targeted by the Taliban. Taliban minister, the foreign minister, has made some of the nice statements saying that they are not going to target Indian assets and interests in Afghanistan. So all that notwithstanding, with the Haqqanis gaining the primacy in the Taliban dispensation in Afghanistan, the Pakistan factor is going to be more pronounced. Stability is not likely to come there, and because stability is not going to come in Afghanistan, daily there's attack on the Taliban by the ISIS, by the AQ, by the Northern Alliance is becoming more and more powerful by the day, and the instability continues to actually grow very strongly. So that the problems of instability or destability in that area are definitely going to be seen in J&K. The LC or the anti-infiltration trade is quite strong. However, we should be prepared for this kind of a uptick in violence or terrorism or infiltration attempts in the near future. That is for sure. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Jen Bhatia. With this, I would like to put across one question, one common question to each of the esteemed panelists to answer. I would be requesting their inputs on this. What should be India's strategy for dealing with terror at the local, that is the state, national, and the international levels in the short, medium, and the long term scenarios? Shall we begin with Jan Hasnain, sir?
Right. I will give you in very brief the way I look at it. You see, terror is not a singular entity. Terror is a system. That we have to first understand. Terror is a system. And therefore, to address terror, there has to be an addressal of the entire system. You just address the terrorist part, you address the wherewithal in terms of weapons and explosives and things like that, and leave out the rest of it, then those networks are all capable of returning. Everything can, the upsurge can all come back again. So whatever you do, there has to be, the first principle has to be a comprehensivity. So an all of government approach, number one. and addresser of all the components which you identify make up the terror system in this particular area in Jammu and Kashmir. For example, you can start with foreign support, that is external aid coming in. Everything depends on Pakistan. So it's a question of addressing Pakistan itself. And addressing Pakistan also has to be done militarily. It has to be done economically. It has to be done politically. It has to be done very, very importantly from a communication angle. The Indian narrative must be able to be played out in the entire world. We must isolate Pakistan, must not allow Pakistan to be able to exploit its geostrategic advantage. It's got a huge geostrategic advantage, which we'll have to admit. And that geostrategic advantage must be negated, must be neutralized. The Indian narrative has to be played out. There's no reason why India, a country economically so much stronger, militarily stronger, politically respected, diplomatically respected around the world for its democratic credentials, etc., why our voice cannot be heard in all the important capitals of the world. This is the diplomatic side which I'm talking about. Then I would look at the human resources involved in terror, which is essentially the terrorist himself. Curtailing that, infiltration has to be countered. No two ways about it. Recruitment has to be countered, which means you go back to what General Nirmal Vij said in 2004, I still remember. 2003 rather, when he took over as the chief. He said, bring the strength of terrorists in the Kashmir Valley to sub 1,000. And that was so important because today, as you very correctly said, I think by Jan Bhatia itself, Jan Arun Bhatia, 135, 140 terrorists today in the valley. Yet, that strength is creating a problem for us. But we brought it to sub 1,000 from 2003 onwards. This is something we got to continue working on, that when the mathematics of terror, you eliminate, neutralize a certain segment of terrorists. For example, 130 terrorists have been killed this year. It should not be that 130 or 140 have been recreated by recruitment and by infiltration. You have to ensure that the mathematics are absolutely correct. 50, 60 terrorists could be created so that at the end of the year, the mathematics are completely in your favor. That's one. Material, I'm not concerned so much about because I know that material is very, very difficult bringing in material today. Small segments of equipment coming in here and there. Of course, the drone threat is something that we have to cater for. Strategically, when you look at it, ideology has to be neutral. This entire aspect of separatism is linked essentially to radicalism. The whole intent of creating the Kashmiri Pandit Holocaust in January of 1990 was linked to this, to make sure that an obscurantist ideology coming in from the Middle East to Pakistan, Afghanistan, and linking it to Kashmir, to bring the Ummah together, to bring about a voice, an Islamic voice together, to ensure that Kashmir's credentials, Kashmir's secular credentials, the aspect of Kashmiriyat and Sufiyat does not exist any longer. That was the whole intent. We have to recreate that. The attempt by Prime Minister Modi to bring about a Sufi revival last 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the thing was conducted in Delhi itself. This should be repeated many times over. One or two other issues only strategically, networks. All networks have to be identified. I think the NIA has done a very good job on the financial networks, the banking system, to make sure that all kinds of clandestine network financial systems do not allow money to enter into the system there. Overall, the police has done a superb job on this. Other networks exist. Media has been controlled to a very large extent. The ideological networks have to be ensured that they are controlled too. The wide road networks, the networks which used to be involved with the creation of the street agitations, they have been largely neutralized, controlled, but they must not be allowed to revive. There has to be some kind of a coherence in our strategy, in the sense that there has to be some kind of a convergence in what Delhi does and what Srinagar does. This will come to the fore in the very near future when the assembly elections take place. We don't know what government is going to come in Srinagar at that particular time. So there has to be a convergence. You can't have two voices. You can't have Delhi speaking in a different voice and Kashmir speaking in a different voice. I think political convergence and consensus on Kashmir is so important. This is one of the essential aspects of the strategy. If there is a one voice which is being spoken from Delhi to Srinagar to Jammu, this dissonance between Srinagar and Jammu is something which Vaid Saab could talk about much more. This dissonance between Srinagar and Jammu creates obstacles in the path in a huge way. I mean, I can carry on and on, but I think one or two other things in the end would be a development of a communication strategy which we have not been successful in developing at all. As very correctly brought out by Vaid Saab, there are jihadis, there are cyber jihadis who are there, and these are essentially information warriors. 6,000, 7,000 of them which have been created by Pakistan. We can't have Jammu and Kashmir police and the Indian army trying to play out a communication strategy. No, it can't be done. We need professionals. We need academics.
Yes.
We need a system to do all this entire thing, right? And we need research, and all the time the research work on this has to be very, very important. And lastly, may I say that one of the very important aspects is the role of the academic, which dovetails with the role of the media, writing the positive narrative, writing the correct narrative, projecting it to the country, not creating that negativity which invariably is created by actions in Kashmir. We have to safeguard ourselves from this to make sure that we can only take a positive narrative ahead. I will stop here because otherwise this will go too long, and I have to sort of peel off from this discussion after some time because I have a television program also coming up. That's why. Thank you.
Thank you, Jal Hasnain. There were very, very sound and sane inputs from your side, as expected. May I now request Dr. Vaid for his inputs on the same?
I will avoid what General Hasnain has said because that would be repetition. A lot of those are very, very important, valuable suggestions, and I would not like to repeat them. But I would like to add few things. One, the very ecosystem in Kashmir, which actually, which is responsible for creation, nurturing, and sustaining terrorism, that needs to be actually dismantled. I'm talking of only Kashmir part. Don't leave it to only security forces. I think security forces are doing their job commendable, but you have so many wings of the government. You have education system, you have universities, you have the whole civil society, religious leaders, political parties, very rightly put up by General Hussain. See, one statement coming from Delhi, and look at the statements coming from mainstream pro-India parties like PDP and National Conference. These are taken advantage of by RIC across, and not only them, even the youth of Kashmir gets very distracted and a wrong direction, which actually should not be our aim. And you are harming your own nation. And ultimately, who are suffering? The people of Kashmir are sufferers. They are the biggest sufferers. In fact, most important aspect of the whole of this conflict is the human resource of Kashmir. Our main concern should be their welfare. And by issuing such statements, are you helping them? No. So that is one part. Other I would like to mention is Hurriyat was created in the early 90s as a separatist party, and it has an agenda. It is promoting a separatist agenda. It has only brought bloodshed and destruction in Kashmir. Do they have a plan for welfare and development of people? I don't think so. They are responsible for killing of so many people and destruction, and the economy has been destroyed. The complete life of Kashmir has been destroyed. Now, I think a political dispensation which is pursuing agenda of Pakistan, the separatist agenda of Pakistan, should not be taking advantage of the Indian democratic system. That is my personal feeling. I think we should not allow such entities. Another aspect I would like to add here is Jamaat-e-Islami is playing a very dirty role in this whole the game of terrorism in Kashmir, and I think the focus of the Indian state needs to be on Jamaat-e-Islami, because every Kashmiri in the valley knows the dirty role played by Jamaat-e-Islami and how they are actually supporting, nurturing the uh, Hizbul Mujahideen and other terrorist organizations. I think we need to have a great crackdown on them. The uh, mm, systemic uh, things which General Hasnan mentioned, like crackdown by NIA on financial systems, the other systems we need to crack down. Coming to the national level, we, I think, have fishers not only in Bengal, in Kerala, in Hyderabad, in some cities of UP. I think uh, hundreds of Jamaat-e-Islami funded madrasas run in Kashmir, and thousands of them are across the country. We need to see whether they are giving pure religious Islamic education, or are they being used for radicalizing youth. I think some surveillance needs to be on them. And then who is funding them? What is the purpose of this funding? So somebody needs to go into them in this aspect of society. Political parties, we need to, I think, um, have some kind of consensus as far as national security is concerned. Look at the statements coming from PFI, statements coming from organizations like SIMI. Uh, I think they're quite damaging to the integrity and security of the country. So we need to be cautious about it. International part, already India has played a very good role. I think we need to sustain this a policy of exposing the Pakistan and China nexus, of promoting terrorism, of posing a threat to the democratic system of the world, and not only India, across the world. I think that offensive India must continue, and misuse of international fora like UN and other international organizations, which China and Pakistan misuses. These aspects we need to pay and pay attention to. Another aspect I wanted to mention here is, I think we need to have a long-term plan to and a comprehensive plan to tackle terrorism. Mm, you saw what President Macron came out with his action plan in his country, in France. I think something like that India needs to think on these lines, implement that on ground to tackle the menace of terrorism. Thank you.
General Vinod Bhatia, can I have your inputs?
General Asnan has really covered the complete thing, and so is after that thereafter. So I'll not go on the repetition, but we'll have to address both the internal factors and the external factors. We have to understand the Pakistan is only a major factor, though, and as covered earlier, how do we change Pakistan's behavior in the mid to long term? One of the things we have a diplomatic, political, economic, and of course the military needs, and they are proving effective at times and not so effective at other times. Because the world is it's a network world, and they will always look after their own national interests. And Pakistan got that geostrategic space, as Jim Mastani pointed out. We also have to, I think, adding to all this, we should look at Pakistan's weaknesses. And one of the major weaknesses of Pakistan, where we can put pressure on Pakistan, is the provisions of the IWT, the Indus Water Treaty. We've been very responsible, and that's how we should be. But there are ways and means of putting pressure on them on the Indus water, because 95% of the water of Pakistan flows from India, and that's a very major concern for Pakistan. So Pakistan should try to understand that in the long term we can create problems for them on the IWP. They can keep going to the International Court of Justice, and we know how courts of justice function. We have to be a little more aggressive on the water front. So that what actually pinches Pakistan. I really do not know diplomatically how it works, but there are a lot of nations who just don't bother too much about the international law, and China is one of them. And we are today a responsible power. We are a researching nation. We are a regional power, and we will have to look after our own national interests, and our national interests are a secure India, a modern India, a prosperous India. And we cannot be prosperous modern without being secure. And terrorism is going to continue the way it's going to continue the last 4 decades. So Pakistan army has to feel the pinch, and the Pakistan people have to feel the pinch, feel the pain of spreading terrorism weapons. I will not go into more details than covered. Internally, we'll have to look at what the people of, especially Jammu and Kashmir, look at their aspirations, address their aspirations. If you go to the budget of Jammu and Kashmir, the budget of Jammu and Kashmir for the present financial year, what the figure is 1,80,000, and that's for a population of about 1.36 crores. Whereas neighboring Punjab or Haryana, for that matter, Punjab got a budget of about 1.62 lakh crores, or probably 3 crores. So look at where is this money going? Are we putting a good governance? Are we giving a good, effective administration, a good education system, economic development? I don't think it is there. We'll have to look at our own internal fault lines also. Without that, we keep on saying that everything is very nice, everything is very good, and the IW we talk, information what we talk about, the narratives we talk about, the narratives have to match what is happening, what people see also. And too much of visual footprints of the armed forces, like I said, the generation, the making generation in the 90s. People have grown up just seeing the security forces in Kashmir. So we have to be an all-round thing. We strengthen the counter-terrorism grade. We have a very good counter-terrorism grade, but that alone is not going to suffice. We need the political will, both at the center and the state, because it is a political problem. Let me also say it's a political problem, and these are solved political issues. Economic development and the cost of repetition, education, the cost of repetition, this has to match good effective administration. And we also have to understand that without effective administration, we'll continue to go on the way we are going. The administration also has to change. I think I'll end out here, and I endorse what I said earlier. Totally with a lot of things are being done, and we should reinforce good things and keep reviewing the strategy every 3 to 4 years. We have an action plan. The NIA is there, and the other factions which are to be taken care of. What we normally call velvet glove with iron fist. Thank you.
Me being the last speaker, most of the points have already been covered. But to bring it very crisply, you see, there has to be a whole of government
Okay.
approach. There is no denying that. So, what I am talking of, very quickly, there has to be a whole of government approach, but the primacy of the effort can be a little nuanced or different at the state level, at the national level, and the international level. What I would say is that security and I would say psychological conditioning or reconditioning should be the prime effort in the immediate short to mid-term in at the state level, while all the other revamping the education system, the religious discourse, all that happens, the alienation or mainstreaming the alienated population, administration, economic upswing takes place, but the primacy of the security and the psychological effort in JNK in the foreseeable future has to have the primacy. Of course, we have to raise the cost not only for Pakistan, but also for the separatists, for the OGW, for the terrorists per se, as also for those elements which were alluded to by General Hasnain earlier, those who will say Jibe Jibe Pakistan, or who will talk of who will put the national flag of Pakistan in Srinagar, or who will make such statements over something like a cricket match also, who politicize that. So the cost, both at the personal level and as a society, has to be raised within the Awam, while we try to mainstream the Awam, as also the Pak military, be it across the line of control, for the civilians staying across, so that they put pressure on the Pakistan military to stop or shift the launch pads and other nefarious activities which they undertake from there. So, security being the primacy at the state level for the time being. At the national level, the political and the economic effort should be having primacy. We have to target again Pakistan, and also bring in the mainstreaming of J&K as part of India. So that should be the economic and the political effort should be the prime at the national level, while we also put the economic costs on Pakistan for in the regional context. The third, at the international level, the primacy should go onto geoeconomics as also diplomatic. How to create the environment whereby bringing that narrative and showcasing to the world with facts as to how Pakistan needs to be not only grey listed but blacklisted on FATF, how it needs to be labeled a pariah state, and also to bring in a commonality in this global war on terrorism. So that can be the primacy at the international level. Just a word on General Vinod Bhatia talked of IWT. 95, I would say 99% of the water coming into JNK and Punjab into Pakistan is from our the rivers which flow from the Indian subcontinent into the Indus River in due course at various stages. Now that is there actually is healed, and we've given them too easily. Effort should be made on that, and international laws are either recognized or accepted, but they are not having greater say than our own national interests. And our national interests say that we need to use all those pressure points which need to be put on Pakistan, and that Indus Water Treaty, that abrogation should happen not tomorrow, but as of yesterday. And that we need to divert those waters for our own national use, as also control that flow of water, which will bring him on the knees. We should not be too worried as to the China guy will do the same to us, that we will tackle when the time comes. But the Indus Water Treaty is something which will put that requisite pressure on Pakistan. And when we can abrogate 370, when we can also take firm measures by way of CAA and the national accountability or the population registers and all that, Indus Water Treaty is also something which we must look at more critically in our safeguarding of our national interests. Thank you.
I thank all the esteemed panelists of today's discussion. We've had major inputs on various aspects of securing J&K. I hope our viewers also find that they have got very, very important inputs on solving these issues. To conclude, perceptible shifts in the national identity and domestic politics have introduced fundamental rethinking at the state level in Jammu and Kashmir, and exceptional initiatives have been taken at all levels by the forces, the civil administration, as well as the trajectory of the situation in the state has been successfully altered. Though a positive outcome is not assured as yet, as most of you have pointed out, the trend is sufficiently encouraging to hope for better times. But the process is likely to remain a relatively uneven one. I thank all the panelists. I thank General Hasnain, General Arvind Bhatia, General Vinod Bhatia, Dr. Ved for being with us. Namaste. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
Jai Hind, Jai Bharat. Thank you.